That's another logical error. If we look at the screen here, you probably all see a cube, right? Screen is flat. The cube you see is the cube you construct. You're hallucinating a cube. We all agree that we're seeing a cube, but we're all seeing a cube because we're all members of the same species with the same kind of interface, and we make the same kinds of constructions. That's why we agree. So, intersubjective agreement does not mean objective truth. It just means intersubjective agreement, and that's it. And yet, we have this psychological proclivity to say that since we all agree, it must be true. Not at all. That's another elementary logical mistake. So the way to think about physical objects is they're not indicating, so the shapes and colors and so forth of objects are not an indication of truth. They're just a convenient fiction, a standardized way of communicating to us what we need to stay alive. Just like these symbols, right? This doesn't resemble radioactivity. That doesn't resemble biohazard. They're just standard symbols that you know, don't step into that room, don't touch that stuff. And that's what they're there for. That's what evolution has given us. These very simple symbols to keep us alive, but they don't resemble reality. And for this one, I'd like to, just for a moment to turn the lights out. Great. So the screen is flat, but you're probably seeing a 3D hat, right? So the hat that you're seeing is your construction. It's an illusion that you're creating. And you're constructing all the colors and shapes and so forth. This rectangle and that rectangle, are they the same color or different? They look quite different, right?
They're the same, but we see different.
That's right. They are, in fact, I used Photoshop to create this. I used the dropper tool to make sure that the pixels on this are identical to the pixels in that. And to prove it, I'm going to take this brown bar, and I'm using the dynamic tool in Keynote, so I'm not fooling with the bar. I'm just going to move it up there very, very slowly, so I'm not fooling with that bar. And there you go. So you are hallucinating. You're not seeing the true colors. I'll do that again. That's sort of fun, right? That's right. You can watch. So what's going on is your visual system is creating, it's constructing a reality that you can use. It's constructing an interface. In that interface, you have a 3D object. You construct a light coming from the left, which casts a shadow on this side. And then you try to construct material properties of this object. And what you say is, I'm getting the same light to my eye from here as I am from there, but this is in shadow. That's in direct illumination. Therefore, this must be a much brighter surface. And so you're putting together a story. And this is how you create your interface. You don't see reality as it is. So we can have the lights back on. Yeah, right. So the relationship between our perceptions and reality is, in some sense, useful but arbitrary. What is the right perception for that molecule? That's C8H8O3 with functional groups aldehyde, hydroxyl, and ether, okay? So now, given that you know the scientific description of it, how should it be perceived? Well, it turns out we all perceive that as the taste of vanilla, right? Why should vanilla be the right taste for that molecule? It just is. That's what our species has done. We have a particular set of arbitrary interface representations for aspects of reality. Evolution isn't done with us. Our perceptual interface isn't done. 4% of us have synesthesia. There are mutations happening within our species. Our interface is evolving. Some people will see every letter as having a color or every number. Carol Steen, everything that she hears, she'll see a 3D shape. So she actually, for the word cyto, that's the sound cyto, this is what she sees. Notice this isn't just sort of an abstract, it's a very specific, detailed 3D structure with a specific color and texture of the surface. It's very, very detailed. Evolution is playing with new interfaces all the time, very, very complex interfaces. The interface is arbitrary. As long as it has enough information, it can then guide adaptive behavior and be completely unrelated to any resemblance of truth. So the idea is that our perceptual systems are not about giving us a picture of the truth. They are there to forage for fitness. We have senses which have been designed for one thing, to forage for fitness, to get us enough fitness points to stay alive long enough to reproduce. As you look through these images, you're foraging around for information, and eventually you might see that this bar, but what's going on is you don't get like an objective picture of reality. You're foraging all the time, and your visual system has rules for finding the areas in your visual field where it might get the most information it needs right now at this moment for fitness. You can get a picture of how this works. I mean, you might think that you see the whole world in high detail. You don't. You have high detail about a thumb's width at arm's length. That's all you have a high resolution vision in. And your vision falls off so quickly. If you focus at the center dot here, you'll notice that these letters, these letters, these letters, and these letters are all roughly the same resolution. They have the same visibility. And that's because the density of your photoreceptors on your retina falls off dramatically. You have high resolution in the center, 1 or 2 degrees, and then it just falls off dramatically. And the idea is that we're using the periphery as a foraging tool to find out where to find fitness, and then we look at it and put a small bit of very, very complex resources to decode the information about fitness. So it's searching, foraging for fitness, and then just decoding what we need in this moment for fitness. Evolution is not done with us. And we are, in fact, a species that's continuing to evolve. And the way that evolution is working is perhaps very, very different than you might expect. Most of us think that we're the species that's getting the bigger and bigger brains, and that's been our niche. In fact, our brains are shrinking. Our brains were the largest 20,000 years ago, and our brains are in free fall. For the last 20,000 years, our brains have been shrinking at a meteoric rate. We've lost 10% of our brain volume. The size of a tennis ball, the volume of a tennis ball has disappeared from our brains in the last 20,000 years. So evolution couldn't care less about intelligence. It couldn't care less about big brains. It doesn't care at all about truth. It cares about one thing, keeping you alive long enough to reproduce. The reason our brains are shrinking is 20,000 years ago, we were in very, very small groups or on our own. You had to be a jack of all trades and an ace at all of them to stay alive. It was very, very brutal. If you weren't really brilliant, you died. But then we got agriculture and social networks. And all of a sudden, with social networks, you don't have to be a jack of all trades to stay alive. I can go to Trader Joe's, even if I have an IQ of 70, and do just fine. 20,000 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. I would be dead. So I'm grateful for the social network. Without it, I wouldn't be alive today. But the social network takes off these selection pressures for the big brains, and as a result, we don't have them. Brains are very expensive, and if you don't need them, you don't have them. So our brains are shrinking, and they will continue to shrink. And at the rate we're going right now, in 20,000 years from now, we will have shrunk down to where we were 500,000 years ago at Homo erectus. That's what evolution does to us. So evolution doesn't care about truth. It doesn't care about big brains. It doesn't care about intelligence. It only cares about one thing. Do you act in a way that allows you to survive long enough to reproduce? End of story. And that's what shaped our perceptions. So the idea then is it's all about fitness. Our perceptions are all about giving us information about fitness. All of our experiences are an interface to tell us about fitness. We then make decisions that allows us to choose what actions we can take to then get as much fitness as possible. That's the point of view in all of this. The idea is that fitness is a function of the true state of the world, whatever the world is, the state of the organism, that particular organism, its state, and the action. It's a very, very complicated function. So to be 5,000 meters underwater is very fit for a benthic fish. For Hoffman, it's fatal. Right? So fitness varies all over the place. It does depend on the truth, but not just on the truth. And because it depends on the organism, the state, and the action, it's all over the place. And that's why when you're tuned to fitness, you're generically not tuned to truth. And that was the point of Chaitan's theorem. So fitness is a technical term in evolution, and it's the only coin of the realm in evolution. It's all about, think of it like a video game in which you're trying to collect points to stay alive and get to the next level. Those points you're collecting are the fitness points in evolution. So what this means about our perceptions of space and time and the physical world is, as Chaitan said, that the physical world as we perceive it is not the truth. It's a fiction that we create to stay alive long enough to reproduce. So this bothered Einstein when he was looking at the quantum mechanics. He said, this is Abraham Pace in 1979, talking with Einstein. He said, Einstein never ceased to ponder the meaning of the quantum theory. We often discussed his notions on objective reality. I recall that during one walk, Einstein suddenly stopped, turned to me, and asked whether I really believe that the moon exists only when I look at it. And the point of view of this interface theory is you create objects on the fly. They are not symbols of truth. They are your current symbol about fitness information. It's the fitness information you need at this moment to stay alive. So yeah, every time I look at the moon, I create the moon that I see, and there is no moon, there is no space and time until I create them. So they don't exist independent of us. So Einstein asked what it means. And what it means is, it means buckle your seatbelt, Dorothy, because Kansas is going bye-bye. Right? This is from, that's I'm quoting Cypher from the Matrix. So what this theory is really saying is, yeah, all the stuff that we thought was the reality, that's what it really means. So Einstein pondered the meaning. This is the meaning. Buckle up, Dorothy. And what physicists now, so I'm coming at this with my team that I mentioned. We're coming at this from the point of view of evolutionary theory, and showing that evolution shows that we don't see reality as it is, that space and time are not fundamental, physical objects are not fundamental. Physicists themselves are coming at this from a different point of view. Nima Arkani Hamed, who is at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, just this year in a lecture in the spring said, space-time is doomed. There is no such thing as space-time fundamentally in the actual underlying description of the laws of physics. That's very startling, because what physics is supposed to be about is describing things as they happen in space and time. So if there's no space-time, it's not clear what physics is about. And this is one of the best and brightest in the field, and what they know is that for us to get a theory of quantum gravity, we have to let go of the notion that space-time is fundamental. There's something deeper that we're going to have to use as the fundamental bedrock for our description, and space-time has to emerge from it. That means that physical objects aren't fundamental either. And if physical objects aren't fundamental, then the notion of causality among physical objects is also not fundamental. What this means, to put it briefly, from the Matrix again, the spoon boy put it very well, there is no spoon. So space, what is it? It's our desktop. But why do we have the format of a 3D space that we have? I propose that it's an error-correcting code. We are trying, the idea is that fitness is the only thing that we're interested in. It's very complicated. There's lots of fitness information. We have finite resources, and so we have to do two things. We have to do data compression and error correction to get, so our perceptual systems are entirely shaped by evolution to do data compression of fitness information and then put it in an error-correcting code. And the reason for error-correcting codes is you don't want to get your fitness information wrong. If you get it wrong, you could make the wrong choice and you could die. So what you have to do is, there's too much fitness information out there to really grasp all of it. So you get little bits. As we saw, you have to search around. You have to forage for fitness. So you get little bits of information and then you encode it. So the idea is that space, as you perceive it, you're not living in an objective 3D space that exists independent of us. You're living in the data structure. You are living in the matrix of your own data structure. It's an error-correcting code.